Police laughed at my son's tears until they saw who his mother was. Sometimes the system shows you exactly who it is when it thinks no one important is watching. Picture this, a 13-year-old boy sitting on a curb, hands cuffed behind his back, tears streaming down his face. Two police officers standing over him, sharing a laugh about what they call another tantrum from another kid who doesn't know his place. But what happens when they realize they were dead wrong about who was watching? What happens when his mother pulls up in a black Mercedes, steps out in her courthouse heels, and they realize they messed with the wrong family? This is that story, a mother's silent power, and how respect is demanded, not given. Meet Jalen Thompson, 13 years old, honor roll student, starting point guard on his middle school basketball team. He's walking home from practice, same route he's taken for 2 years, the same route his mother taught him to navigate safely. Jalen's a good kid, texts his mom after practice, always respectful, carries his student ID like his mom taught him. He's wearing his team hoodie, navy blue, with Riverside Middle Eagles emblazoned across the chest. His backpack is slung over one shoulder, heavy with textbooks. He's eating sunflower seeds from a small bag, occasionally spitting shells into the gutter. The afternoon sun is getting low, casting long shadows across the suburban streets. This neighborhood isn't rough. It's the kind of place where people jog at dusk and leave their garage doors open while they bring in groceries. Jalen pauses at the crosswalk on Maple Street, checking both ways even though there's barely any traffic. He pulls out his phone, types a quick message to his mom, left practice, home in 15. Then he puts the phone away and keeps walking, still crunching on sunflower seeds, completely unaware that a police cruiser has been slowly following him for the past 3 blocks. Officer Derek Martinez is behind the wheel, 28 years old, 3 years on the force. His partner, Officer Janet Collins, 42, 12 years of service, is scrolling through incident reports on her tablet. Martinez notices the kid first, the hoodie, the way he walks with his head slightly down, the fact that he's black in a neighborhood that's predominantly white. "Hey, Collins," Martinez says, slowing the cruiser even more. "Kid up there, looks like he might be casing houses." Collins looks up from her tablet, squints through the windshield. She sees a teenager walking home from school, but Martinez's comment plants a seed. "Could be," she says, though she doesn't really think so. Dispatch mentioned some break-ins in this area last week. This is a lie. There were no break-ins reported in this neighborhood in the past month. They watch as Jalen crosses the street when he notices them behind him. This is exactly what his mother taught him to do. If you feel like someone is following you, change your route, cross the street, do whatever you need to do to create distance. But to Martinez and Collins, this looks like evasive behavior. "Now, why would he do that?" Martinez mutters, turning the wheel to follow. Definitely suspicious now. Jalen's heart starts beating faster. He can feel the car behind him, matching his pace. He thinks about calling his mom, but she taught him never to use his phone when police are around unless absolutely necessary. "Keep your hands visible," she always said. "Don't give them any reason to think you're reaching for something dangerous." So he keeps walking, trying to stay calm, trying to remember everything his mother taught him about these situations. The cruiser pulls alongside him. Collins rolls down the passenger window. "Hey there, son, can you stop for a minute?" Her voice is friendly enough, but there's an authority in it that makes it clear this isn't really a request. Jalen stops, turns toward the car, keeps his hands visible at his sides. "Yes, ma'am," he says, just like his mother taught him. Polite, respectful, non-threatening. "Where are you headed?" Martinez asks, leaning across his partner to look at Jalen through the window. "Home, sir," Jalen replies. "I live on Oak Street, about 6 blocks from here." He's walking straight home, same route he always takes. But Martinez and Collins exchange a look. Oak Street is where some of the bigger houses are, the kind of neighborhood where a kid like this might not belong, in their minds. "What's in the backpack?" Collins asks. Jalen's throat goes dry. "My school books, ma'am, and my basketball gear." He starts to reach for his backpack to show them, but Collins holds up a hand. "Don't reach for anything," she says sharply. The friendly tone is gone now. "We've had some break-ins in this area. You match the description of someone we're looking for." This is where everything goes wrong. because Jalen doesn't match any description. There is no suspect. There are no break-ins. But once officers decide you're suspicious, the truth often becomes irrelevant. A 13-year-old boy walking home becomes a threat that needs to be neutralized. I need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back, Martinez says, getting out of the car. His hand is resting on his service weapon, not drawing it, but making sure Jalen can see it. Jalen's eyes go wide. "But I didn't do anything wrong," he says, his voice cracking slightly. "I'm just walking home from school." "Son, we can do this the easy way or the hard way," Collins says, now out of the car as well. "You can cooperate, or we can call for backup and make this a much bigger scene than it needs to be." Jalen knows he has no choice. His mother prepared him for this moment, hoping it would never come, but knowing it probably would. "Yes, ma'am," he says quietly, turning around. His hands are shaking as he puts them behind his back. The handcuffs are cold and heavy, tighter than they need to be. The metal bites into his wrists. Martinez and Collins search his backpack without asking permission, pulling out textbooks, notebooks, his basketball shoes, a half-eaten protein bar his mom packed for after practice. "What's this?" Collins holds up a small pocket knife attached to his keychain. It's maybe 2 inches long, the kind of thing Boy Scouts carry, completely legal for a minor to possess. Jalen's grandfather gave it to him last Christmas. "It's just a small knife, ma'am. My grandpa gave it to me. I use it to cut tape on packages and stuff." Collins and Martinez exchange another look. In their minds, this confirms their suspicions. They make him sit on the curb, still handcuffed, while they radio in to run his information. Jalen gives them his full name, his address, his student ID number from memory. Everything checks out, of course. But by now, Martinez and Collins are committed to their narrative. They've detained the minor, searched his belongings, and cuffed him in public. If they let him go now without charging him with something, they'll have to admit they made a mistake. And cops, especially cops who've been on the force long enough to know better, don't like admitting mistakes. So they double down. "The knife is concerning," Martinez tells his supervisor over the radio. "Possible intent to commit burglary." Jalen sits on the curb, handcuffed, watching neighbors peek out from behind curtains and blinds. Some of them recognize him. He's babysat for the Johnsons 2 houses down, helped Mrs. Chen carry her groceries last month. But none of them come outside. None of them speak up, because when police are involved, even good neighbors tend to mind their own business. "This is embarrassing," Collins says to Martinez, not intending for Jalen to hear, but not bothering to lower her voice. "Kid's probably gonna cry." And that's when it happens. The tears start. Not because he's weak, but because he's a 13-year-old kid, scared and confused, wondering why doing everything right led to this. The tears are quiet at first, just a few drops rolling down his cheeks. But then the frustration and fear overwhelm him, and he starts to really cry. Martinez and Collins look at each other and start laughing. "Another tantrum," Collins says, shaking her head. "They always cry when they get caught." Martinez nods in agreement. "My kid does the same thing when he gets in trouble, turns on the waterworks hoping for sympathy." But Jalen isn't trying to manipulate anyone. He's crying because he's a child who's been handcuffed and humiliated for the crime of walking home from school while black. He's crying because he did everything his parents taught him to do, and it wasn't enough. "Can I please call my mom?" he asks through his tears. His voice is small and broken, the voice of a kid who just wants his parent to come fix this mess. Martinez and Collins exchange another look. Policy says they should contact a parent or guardian before questioning a minor, but they've been treating this like a street stop, not an arrest. "You get 1 call, Martinez says finally, pulling out Jalen's phone from the evidence bag. 10 seconds, just to let them know where you are. He dials the number Jalen gives him and hands him the phone. Jalen doesn't even wait for his mother to say hello. He just cries into the phone, raw and desperate, the kind of crying that cuts through everything else and goes straight to a parent's heart. On the other end of the line, Diana Thompson is in the middle of cross-examining a witness in a federal civil rights case. She's been an attorney for 15 years, specializing in cases where local police departments have violated citizens' constitutional rights. She knows the sound of her son's voice better than anyone, and she knows the difference between regular upset and real terror. This is terror. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't ask questions. She just listens to her baby cry for exactly 10 seconds before Martinez takes the phone away. Then she calmly excuses herself from the courtroom, gathers her papers, and walks out to her car. Her face doesn't change, her voice doesn't shake. But inside, she's already building a case. Diana Thompson drives a black Mercedes E-Class, a reliable car that projects authority in her profession. She pulls up to the scene quickly. She steps out of her car in a charcoal gray pantsuit, heels, and carrying a legal portfolio, already taking notes. She looks exactly like what she is, a federal attorney who specializes in making local police departments very, very sorry they messed with the wrong family. Martinez sees her first. He's expecting an angry mom, maybe someone who'll scream and cause a scene, someone he can dismiss as emotional and unreasonable. Instead, he sees a woman who looks like she just walked out of a law office, moving with the kind of controlled purpose that makes experienced cops nervous. She doesn't rush toward Jalen. She doesn't shout. She doesn't even look particularly upset. She just walks calmly over to where her son is sitting on the curb, still handcuffed, assessing the situation with an analytical gaze. "Ma'am, you can't park there," Collins calls out, trying to establish control of the situation before it gets away from her. Diana glances at the parking spot where she left her Mercedes and continues walking toward her son without acknowledging the comment. She kneels down next to Jalen, and for just a moment, her professional mask slips. She sees her baby boy sitting handcuffed on a public street like a criminal. Her heart breaks, but her face doesn't show it. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asks quietly, reaching out to touch his face, wiping away the tears. "I didn't do anything wrong, Mom," Jalen whispers. "I was just walking home and they said I looked suspicious and they found Grandpa's knife and—" Diana holds up a hand to stop him. Not because she doesn't want to hear her story, but because she knows Martinez and Collins are listening to every word, looking for anything they can use to justify what they've done. "We'll talk about it at home," she says calmly. "Right now, I need you to stay quiet and let me handle this." She stands up and turns to face the officers. Martinez and Collins are standing about 10 feet away, suddenly very interested in their paperwork. They can tell something has shifted, but they're not sure what. This isn't the emotional outburst they were expecting. This is something else. "Officers," Diana says, her voice perfectly pleasant and professional. "I'm Diana Thompson, and this is my son Jalen. I understand you've detained him. May I ask on what grounds?" "Your son matched the description of a suspect in recent break-ins," Martinez says, reading from his notes. "When we approached him, he exhibited suspicious behavior and was found to be carrying a weapon. He sounds more confident now, sticking to the official story they've constructed." "I see," she says, still perfectly calm. "May I see the reports of these break-ins and the description of the suspect he allegedly matched?" Diana just waits patiently while Martinez and Collins realize they can't produce reports that don't exist or descriptions that were never issued. "That information is part of an ongoing investigation," Collins says finally. "We can't release details to civilians." "Of course," Diana says pleasantly. "Then I assume you'll have no problem providing your badge numbers and the incident report number for this detention? My son was handcuffed and searched. Under state law, that requires documentation." She pulls out her legal pad and a pen. Martinez and Collins exchange a glance. "Ma'am, there's no need to make this more complicated than it needs to be," Martinez says. "Your son was cooperative, no harm done. We just need to finish our report and you can both be on your way." "I appreciate that, officer." Diana waits expectantly. When Martinez doesn't immediately provide his name, she glances at his name tag and writes it down. "Officer Martinez. But I'm still going to need those badge numbers and that incident report. You see, when my 13-year-old son calls me crying because he's been handcuffed for walking home from school, I like to understand exactly what happened and why." That's when Collins makes the mistake that will haunt her. Frustrated by Diana's calm persistence and annoyed at having her authority questioned, she decides to pull rank. "Look, lady, we've got this handled. Your kid was acting suspicious, we checked him out, everything's fine. Maybe instead of giving us attitude, you should be asking yourself why your son was walking around a neighborhood where he doesn't belong." The words hang in the air. Even Martinez looks uncomfortable. Collins just said the quiet part out loud, admitting that they stopped Jalen not because he was doing anything wrong,
but because he was black in a white neighborhood. It's the kind of statement that turns a routine detention into a federal civil rights case. And Diana's slight smile suggests she knows exactly how valuable those words are going to be in court. "I see," Diana says, still writing in her legal pad. "So, to be clear, Officer Collins, you're stating that my son was detained because he was walking in a neighborhood where you felt he didn't belong?"
Not because he committed a crime or matched a specific suspect description, but because of your subjective opinion about which neighborhoods he should or shouldn't be in? Collins realizes her mistake immediately, but it's too late to take the words back. Martinez jumps in, trying to do damage control. "That's not what she meant. We had reports of suspicious activity, and your son's behavior warranted investigation." "Of course," she says pleasantly. Then she reaches into her portfolio and pulls out a business card, handing it to Martinez. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I should have introduced myself properly earlier. I'm Diana Thompson, federal civil rights attorney with the Department of Justice. I specialize in cases involving discriminatory policing practices and constitutional violations by law enforcement agencies." The effect is immediate and dramatic. Martinez stares at the business card like it might bite him. Collins goes visibly pale. They just spent the last half hour racially profiling and illegally detaining the son of a federal attorney who prosecutes cops for a living. "Now then," Diana continues, her voice still perfectly pleasant, "I'm going to need those badge numbers, that incident reports, and the contact information for your supervising officer. I'll also need copies of any body camera footage from this encounter, dash cam recordings, and radio communications. I assume all of this was properly documented according to your department's policies on detaining minors." Martinez and Collins stand there in stunned silence, realizing that what started as a routine harassment of a black teenager has turned into a career-threatening nightmare. The next few minutes unfold with precision. Diana doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't threaten or bluster. "Let's start with the initial stop," she says, still taking notes. "Officer Martinez, you stated that my son matched the description of a suspect. I'd like to see that BOLO alert or incident report with the suspect description." Martinez shuffles through his paperwork, knowing he won't find what she's asking for, because it doesn't exist. It was a general description. Young black male, medium height, wearing a hoodie. Diana looks up from her legal pad. "A general description of young black male in a hoodie covers approximately 40% of the teenage population in this city, Officer Martinez. Are you telling me that you consider that sufficient probable cause to detain and handcuff a minor?" "Furthermore," Diana continues, "my son was walking on a public sidewalk in broad daylight, carrying school materials and eating sunflower seeds. Officer Collins, you mentioned that he was acting suspiciously. Can you be specific about which of those activities you found suspicious?" Collins opens her mouth to respond, then closes it again. "Walking on a sidewalk isn't suspicious. Carrying a backpack isn't suspicious. Eating snacks isn't suspicious. The only thing that made Jalen seem suspicious to them was his skin color, and they all know it." Diana flips to a new page in her legal pad. "Now, regarding the search of my son's backpack, did you obtain consent for that search? Did you inform him that he had the right to refuse? Did you explain that as a minor, he had the right to have a parent or guardian present during questioning?" The officer's silence confirms it. "I see," Diana says, making more notes. "And the weapon you mentioned finding, can you describe it for me?" Martinez holds up the tiny keychain knife, which looks even more ridiculous in his large hands. "It's a knife, ma'am. Could be used as a weapon." Diana examines the knife. "Officer Martinez, are you familiar with state law regarding knives and minors? Specifically, the statute that permits minors to carry knives with blades under 3 inches for utility purposes. This knife has a blade approximately 1 3/4 inches long, well within legal limits. My son's grandfather gave it to him as a Christmas gift. It's been in his backpack since January, and he's used it exactly twice. Once to open a package from his grandmother, and once to cut a loose thread off his basketball uniform." But Diana isn't finished. "Now, let's discuss the handcuffs," she says, glancing at Jalen, who's still sitting on the curb with his hands restrained behind his back. My son is 13 years old, 5 feet 4 inches tall, and weighs approximately 110 pounds. He was walking home from school with a backpack full of textbooks. Officer Collins, can you explain to me what immediate physical threat he posed that required restraints? Collins tries one more time to salvage the situation. Ma'am, we were just being cautious. Standard procedure for our safety. Standard procedure, Officer Collins? According to your own department's policy manual, handcuffs should only be used on minors when there's an immediate threat of violence or flight. My son was cooperative throughout this encounter. He provided his full name and address. He submitted to being searched without resistance. He made no threatening movements or statements. So I ask again, what immediate threat did he pose? By now, a small crowd has gathered. Neighbors who initially stayed inside are starting to come out, drawn by the unusual sight of a professional woman calmly confronting 2 police officers. Some of them recognize Jalen from around the neighborhood. Mrs. Chen, whose groceries he helped carry, looks horrified to see him handcuffed. Mr. Johnson, whose kids Jalen babysits, is recording the encounter on his phone. Officer Martinez, I think it would be appropriate to remove my son's handcuffs now. He's clearly not a flight risk given that his mother is here, and continuing to restrain a cooperative minor in front of his neighbors seems unnecessarily punitive. Martinez looks to Collins, who nods reluctantly. They uncuff Jalen, who immediately rubs his wrists where the metal has left red marks. Diana makes a note of the marks, knowing they'll photograph them later as evidence of excessive force against the minor. Thank you, Diana says pleasantly. Now, I believe we were discussing the incident report. I'll need the report number, the supervising officer's contact information, and confirmation that this entire encounter was recorded on your body cameras as required by department policy. Our body cameras, Martinez starts, then trails off. Diana's expression doesn't change. Let me guess, she says calmly. Your body cameras weren't activated during this encounter. Despite department policy requiring activation for all citizen contacts, despite the fact that you were detaining and searching a minor, despite the obvious potential for this situation to require documentation, the silence stretches for several seconds. Finally, Collins speaks up. There may have been a technical malfunction. Diana makes another note. I see. So we have no video record of this encounter, no written report filed before I arrived, no supervisor consulted before handcuffing a minor, and no legal justification for any of the actions taken? Is that an accurate summary, officers? At this point, Martinez's radio crackles to life. It's their supervisor, Sergeant Williams, responding to a call about a situation at their location. Unit 47, what's your status? Williams's voice comes through clearly. Martinez keys his radio nervously. Sarge, we're dealing with a minor detention that's gotten a bit complicated. There's a pause. Complicated how? Martinez looks at Diana. We might need you to respond to our location, Martinez says finally. Diana looks up from her legal pad. Actually, Officer Martinez, I think that's an excellent idea. I'd very much like to speak with your supervisor. She hands him another business card. Please give this to Sergeant Williams when he arrives. I think he'll want to understand exactly what happened here before this goes any further up the chain of command. While they wait for the supervisor, Diana walks over to her son. How are you feeling, baby? She asks quietly, switching back to mom mode for just a moment. Jalen looks up at her with a mixture of admiration and relief. I'm okay, Mom. Are you gonna sue them? Diana smiles slightly. We'll talk about that at home. Right now, I just want to make sure this doesn't happen to any other kids. But Jalen knows his mother well enough to recognize the look in her eyes. Now, she's using it for him, and despite everything that's happened, he feels safe again. Sergeant Williams arrives, stepping out of his patrol car with the weary expression of a supervisor facing a mess. Williams approaches Diana first, reading the business card Martinez handed him. His expression grows increasingly grim as he processes the information. Federal attorney, civil rights specialist, and the mother of the kid his officers just detained without cause. Miss Thompson, Williams says, extending his hand, I'm Sergeant Williams.
I understand there's been some kind of misunderstanding here. Diana shakes his hand firmly. Good afternoon, Sergeant. I'm not sure I'd characterize the racial profiling and illegal detention of my minor son as a misunderstanding, but I appreciate you responding so quickly. Why don't we step over here and discuss what happened, William suggests, trying to move the conversation away from the growing crowd of onlookers. But Diana shakes her head. I think we're fine right here, Sergeant. After all, my son was detained in public, searched in public, and handcuffed in public. I see no reason why the discussion of those actions shouldn't also be public. And that's when Williams realizes that Diana Thompson isn't just seeking an apology or even compensation. She's making an example. She wants the neighborhood to see what happens when police officers overstep their authority. She wants Martinez and Collins to understand that their actions have consequences. She wants every cop in the city to know that there are some families you don't mess with unless you're prepared for a fight you can't win. The drive home is quiet at first. Jalen sits in the passenger seat of his mother's Mercedes, still processing what just happened. His wrists still ache from the handcuffs, and he keeps replaying the moment when Officer Collins laughed at his tears. But more than that, he's thinking about his mother's transformation. From concerned parent to powerful attorney, dismantling two officers with just questions and a business card. Mom, he says finally, as they turn onto their street, I did everything you taught me. I was polite, I kept my hands visible, I didn't argue or resist. But it didn't matter, did it? His voice is small, the voice of a child whose faith in fairness has been shaken. Diana's heart breaks a little more, but she keeps her voice steady. You did everything right, baby. Everything. This wasn't about anything you did or didn't do. This was about them seeing a young black man and deciding you didn't belong in that neighborhood. This was about them choosing to see a threat instead of a child. She pauses at a red light and looks at him. But here's what I want you to understand. You may not have deserved their respect, but you earned mine. You handled yourself with dignity in an impossible situation. They pull into their driveway, and Diana turns off the engine. For a moment, they just sit there in the quiet garage, the automatic door closing behind them, shutting out the world where 13-year-old boys get handcuffed for walking home from school. Are we going to sue them? Jalen asks again. And this time, Diana's answer is more direct. Yes, she says simply. We're going to sue the officers, the department, and the city. Not for money, though there will be money. We're going to sue them because what happened to you happens to other kids every day, and those kids don't have mothers who know how to fight back. We're going to sue them because the only language institutions like police departments understand is liability and consequences. They walk into the house together, and Diana watches as Jalen hangs his team hoodie in the hall closet, the same hoodie that Officers Martinez and Collins decided made him look suspicious. I thought I did something wrong, Jalen says, sitting heavily on the living room couch. When they started laughing at me for crying, I thought maybe I was being a baby. Maybe I should have been tougher. Diana sits beside him, and for the first time since his phone call, she lets her professional composure crack slightly. Baby, listen to me. You are 13. 13. When I was your age, the scariest thing I had to deal with was pop quizzes and whether Tommy Martinez liked me back. You shouldn't have to be tough enough to handle being treated like a criminal for walking home from school. The fact that you stayed calm, stayed respectful, stayed safe, that's not being weak. That's being strong in a way no child should have to be. She pulls out her phone and starts scrolling through her contacts. I'm going to make some calls tonight. By tomorrow morning, there's going to be an official complaint filed with Internal Affairs, a civil rights violation report with the FBI, and a lawsuit in federal court. But first, we're going to document everything, those marks on your wrists, your emotional state, the timeline of events. This isn't just about getting justice for you. This is about making sure Officers Martinez and Collins think twice before they put handcuffs. As Diana makes her calls, moving seamlessly between different agencies and legal contacts, Jalen realizes something about her mother. She chose this specialty because she knew that someday the system might come for her own family. The phone calls continue late into the evening. Diana speaks with her supervisor at the Department of Justice, outlining the basic facts and requesting permission to pursue the case personally. She contacts the FBI's Civil Rights Division, filing a formal complaint that will trigger a federal investigation into the officer's conduct. She calls her colleague Maria Santos, who specializes in police misconduct cases, to get a second opinion on strategy and damages. But between calls, she checks on Jalen, making sure he's eating dinner, helping him with homework, maintaining the routine that keeps his world stable, even as she systematically dismantles the careers of the men who traumatized him. "Mom," Jalen says, "what's going to happen to Officers Martinez and Collins?" Diana looks up from her screen. "Well," she says carefully, "Officer Martinez is relatively new, only 3 years on the force. If he's smart, he'll cooperate fully with the investigation, admit his mistakes, and probably end up with a suspension and mandatory training on constitutional rights and racial bias. His career isn't necessarily over, but it's definitely going to have a permanent black mark." She pauses, then continues. "Officer Collins is a different story. She's been on the force for 12 years, long enough to know better. She's the one who made the comment about you not belonging in that neighborhood, which establishes discriminatory intent. She's also the one who failed to activate her body camera, suggesting deliberate concealment of misconduct. Collins is probably going to lose her job, and depending on what the investigation turns up about her other cases, she might face criminal charges." Jalen processes this information quietly. "Do you feel bad for them?" he asks. Diana considers her answer carefully. "I feel bad for their families," she says finally. "Officer Martinez has 2 young children who are going to have to deal with their father being in the news for all the wrong reasons. Officer Collins has a teenage daughter who's going to face questions at school about her mother's conduct. I feel bad for the good officers in their department who are going to have to work harder to rebuild community trust because of what Martinez and Collins did." She closes her laptop and gives Jalen her full attention. "But do I feel bad for them personally? No, baby, I don't. They had a choice today. They could have seen a young man walking home from school and left him alone. They could have approached you politely and walked away when it became clear you weren't doing anything wrong. They could have treated you with the basic dignity every human being deserves. Instead, they chose to see a threat. They chose to escalate. They chose to handcuff a child and laugh at his tears." Diana stands up and walks to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where her son was detained just hours earlier. "Actions have consequences, Jalen. That's one of the most important lessons you can learn in life. Martinez and Collins made their choices today. Now, they get to live with the consequences. Over the next several weeks, those consequences unfold. The FBI launches a formal investigation into the officers' conduct, reviewing their arrest records for patterns of racial bias. Internal Affairs interviews witnesses, including the neighbors who recorded parts of the encounter. The local media picks up the story, turning Diana and Jalen into reluctant public figures in the ongoing conversation about police reform. The civil lawsuit moves forward on multiple tracks. Diana argues that the officers violated Jalen's 4th and 14th Amendment rights through unlawful detention and discriminatory enforcement. She seeks monetary damages for emotional distress, violation of civil rights, and punitive damages designed to deter similar conduct in the future. But, more importantly, she negotiates a consent decree requiring the entire police department to implement new training on implicit bias, community policing, and constitutional rights. Officer Martinez, faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of federal prosecution, agrees to cooperate with the investigation. He admits that the detention was unjustified and that he allowed his assumptions about young black men to cloud his judgment. He undergoes extensive retraining, accepts a 6-month suspension without pay, and eventually transfers to a different department in a smaller city where he can rebuild his career under closer supervision. Officer Collins takes a different approach, fighting the charges and maintaining that her conduct was justified. Her strategy backfires when the FBI investigation reveals a pattern of discriminatory stops over her career. She's terminated from the police force, loses her pension, and faces federal charges for violating citizens' civil rights under color of law. The case becomes a cautionary tale used in police academies across the country about the career-ending consequences of racial profiling. Sergeant Williams, who handled the immediate aftermath professionally, implements department-wide reforms that become a model for other agencies. The settlement with the city includes funding for community policing initiatives, civilian oversight of police conduct, and a scholarship program for students pursuing careers in civil rights law. But perhaps the most significant consequence is the conversation the case sparks in living rooms across the country. Parents of black children see Diana Thompson on the news and think about their own sons and daughters walking home from school. Police officers watch the footage of Martinez and Collins being systematically dismantled by a mother's quiet fury and reconsider their own assumptions about who deserves respect and who doesn't. The story becomes a teaching moment, shared on social media with commentary about the importance of knowing your rights, the power of preparation, and the difference between justice and revenge. Diana didn't seek to destroy Martinez and Collins out of personal animosity. She sought to hold them accountable because accountability is the only thing that changes behavior on an institutional level. They saw a suspect, Diana says in her final interview about the case. I raised a son, but they'll remember me. In a system where black children are too often seen as problems to be solved rather than people to be protected, Diana Thompson made sure that at least 2 officers will think twice before making that mistake again. The hoodie hangs in Jalen's closet, clean and folded, waiting for the next basketball practice. But now it carries a different weight. Not the burden of suspicion, but the armor of survival. Jalen wears it with pride, knowing that his mother turned his worst day into a victory not just for their family, but for every child who shouldn't have to choose between being safe and being themselves. It's about a mother who spent 15 years learning how to fight a system that would eventually come for her son, and who was ready when that day arrived. Diana Thompson raised a son who knows his rights, knows his worth, and knows that respect isn't given freely. It's demanded, earned, and sometimes fought for in courtrooms and public streets. And when the system tried to strip that dignity away, she reminded everyone involved that some families don't break under pressure. They fight back. And they win. The case of Thompson vs. Martinez resulted in a $750,000 settlement and comprehensive police reforms. Officer Martinez completed sensitivity training and continued his career in a different department. Officer Collins was terminated and faced federal civil rights charges. The Thompson family donated a portion of their settlement to fund legal aid for families facing police misconduct. Today, Jalen Thompson is a senior in high school, captain of his basketball team, and planning to study criminal justice in college. He still walks home from practice, but now he walks with the knowledge that he has a mother who will move heaven and earth to protect him and a community that has his back. As Diana Thompson says, they saw a suspect. I raised a son, but they'll remember me.